we'll be recording this as well, so please feel free. We are also, the chat is open for questions, and we have it set so that everybody's mics are off until that we've gone through our presenters, and at that point we will open it up for some Q&A from members of the press. So without further ado, I want to turn this over to Paul Webster, who's the Clean and Healthy New York Policy and Program Director. Paul?
Hello, good morning, everyone. And thanks so much for being here in attendance with us today. As Bobbi introduced, my name is Paul Webster. I am the Policy and Program Director here at Clean and Healthy New York, and one of the co-leaders of the Just Green Partnership in New York State. Our colleague Sarah is going to put up a map of PFAS contamination costs in New York State that we were able to develop with one of our national organizations, State for States, who has a larger website called nonsticknightmare.org. And our calculation right now is $750 million is being spent, and it's really a vast underestimate of the costs our state and municipalities are paying for decades of wanton PFAS use. When you consider the new cost for water treatment, yet unknown cost for PFAS leaching from landfills, hazardous waste landfills, being released into the air from incinerators, and being spread as biosolids on farm fields. The full cost of this problem is astronomical, and it's vital that we stop the use of PFAS in products as quickly as possible. The state legislature has the opportunity to pass a package of bills that will help reshape the market, not only here, but nationally. And they have a shrinking window with only 5 days of session left in which to do so. So we urge the Senate and Assembly to take rapid action now. And we found that no region of New York State is immune to PFAS contamination. Taxpayers didn't cause the contamination, but we're largely shouldering the cost burden of paying for the cleanup. So we're trying to prevent PFAS contamination in the first place to avoid these nightmare costs. And these costs are just the tip of the iceberg because hidden and future costs still loom. And it's estimated that our PFAS contamination cleanup costs are going to average over 1.4 billion in the out years, and as we clean this mess up. Bobbi?
Thanks so much, Paul. And so in response to this clear crisis that we are facing, we are calling for a package of bills to be passed that would remove PFAS from products that people use every day. And we have with us this morning some of the legislative champions for those bills. And so I'd like to offer, is Assemblywoman Fahy able to unmute and join us? Okay, we'll come back there. Assemblymember Zebrowski.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
I'm sorry. Oh boy, this is, it took a minute to get the prompt. So I see my face is still not on there. So I apologize.
I think you should be able to.
While they're figuring that out, please go ahead and let Ken Zebrowski go in.
Okay.
Yeah, please, and I'll go next while somebody figures out how to, or lets me on video. Please go ahead, okay. Ken.
Great. I think you are on mute.
Yes, sorry. Good morning, everyone, and thank you. It's my good colleague Pat Fahy is a environmental champion on so many issues. It's great to collaborate with her and so many folks on this Zoom. We are running around here in conference and committee meetings and stuff, so it's great to be with you this morning and talk about this important issue. As I think the prior speaker just said, we're all paying for this. And I obviously had been aware of these chemicals, but what really drove it home for a lot of my residents in Rockland County was the fact that it came up in our water supply. And not only that, but obviously then our water system had to go through multi-million-dollar filters in order to get PFAS chemicals out of the water supply. And worse, you can't just snap your fingers and put this stuff in overnight. So not only the cost, but you got a couple of years now where people are ingesting these chemicals while the filters are being installed. So you take a step back and say, okay, we need to remedy our water supply, but the fact remains that you may be remedying your water supply now, but these chemicals continue to be in products and continue to be in and around our environment because our manufacturers aren't doing anything to get them out. So we don't need to just remedy, we need to stop the contamination of PFAS chemicals. And so that's why I've been proud to partner with so many champions on this Zoom in introducing legislation. Got a couple bills over the years, but we did recently introduce a bill that we all sort of collaboratively worked on together, which would phase out a number of additional product categories, additional textiles, fabrics, rugs, cookware, ski wax, and paints, and other cleaning products. Together, we need to completely eliminate these chemicals from the products we use and the products that are manufactured here in New York State. As has been described here this morning and described in many other forums, these are forever chemicals that are detrimental to the public health and safety, and it's not enough to just remediate. We need to remediate and also stop these chemicals from being used and contaminating our water supply and our environment. So we've already submitted this legislation. We should have a bill number soon. And it's been my pleasure to collaborate with so many champions and so many other colleagues in the legislature, like Assemblymember Pat Fahy, who hopefully will get her camera fixed and you'll hear from next. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm okay. I'm on and always happy to follow Assemblymember Ken Zebrowski. Thank you for the championing of a host of bills, but particularly on this PFAS. And thanks to everyone on this call, because these are just so important. And I don't think we can say that enough, that these are the forever chemicals. The more I learn, the more disturbed I am by it. And I am so proud, a couple of years ago, to have sponsored the PFAS in food packaging. And I know we're not there fully yet, but we're already seeing a dramatic difference with takeout packaging, with traditional food packaging, getting away from the styrofoams, the plastics, and more. As well as those linings of that food packaging that often has the PFAS. And of course, this year, since we were last on a call, we did pass the PFAS ban in clothing, and that's in common apparel. Certainly, it wouldn't exempt some of the extreme outerwear. But we are waiting and expecting that will pass finally in the Senate as well, and have had so many tremendous champions over there, including Senator Parker. But I also want to add that one of the questions we were asked about the PFAS in clothing is what does that mean for clothing, right? There are alternatives. In fact, there's growing lists, and it's becoming a very positive marketing strategy for them for a host of these but a host of these apparel companies. And they're certainly not all expensive. It's H&M, it's Levi, it's Uniqlo, it's Zara. Excuse me. So it's Keen shoes. So there are alternatives. And again, as Assemblymember Zebrowski and others have pointed out, it's not just the clothing. It's not what we wear. The disturbing part for me is that we wash those clothes, and then whatever we wash with, it is seeping into our water supply. And that is why the vast majority of American residents are showing signs of PFAS contamination in their bodies. And that's disturbing. And the fact that the majority of children's clothing that is labeled waterproof or stain resistant is also showing PFAS substances. So, and I know I don't have to say it's one thing to talk about Flint, Michigan and Hoosick Falls, but to see some of these problems emerging throughout Rockland County, let alone the city of Newburgh and others, we've got to stop. We've got to stop. And as the Assembly member said, it's not enough to remediate. We've got to prevent. So we have great alternatives. I'm so proud of our bill, as well as the package of legislation, and really hope that we will get this all over the finish line this year. Thank you, everybody. Always a pleasure to join you, and thank you for the support. Please, we have just over a week left, and let's get these over the finish line. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman. We really appreciate your time and all of the work that you've done to address PFAS and help get rid of it. So next I'm going to turn to some of the advocates that have been working. First, we're going to hear from Sonal Jessel with We Act for Environmental Justice.
Thank you so much, Bobbi. I'm happy to be here, everyone. Apologies for being outside. I'm at a conference. So thank you, special thank you absolutely to our legislative champions, Assemblymember Fahy, Assemblymember Zebrowski, and so many others that have been working so hard on this issue for so long that just should not be a problem anymore. Albany, Buffalo, Utica, so many parts of New York City, Long Island, all of these places are dealing with such high levels of PFAS contamination that it's not only in our waterways, it's in our rain, it is in all of the products that we use, it is in our cooking, it is in our food packaging, it is everywhere. And this leads to so many negative health impacts, including huge impacts on our nervous system and our reproductive health systems, and causing cancer, especially. It's such a major issue. And this issue does not impact everyone the same. All over New York State, we can see it is the lower income communities that have greater exposure to PFAS contamination, in big part because the industrial spaces are sited in those locations, in those communities. And so it is really important, not only for all of New York State, but for especially vulnerable populations, that we are stopping the production of PFAS in New York State, and that we're cleaning up this trillions of dollars of problem that we have here. That is continuing to harm the health of people for a lifetime. It's time that we stop allowing companies that are making so much money profit off of these chemicals from poisoning people and having people have to carry the lifelong damage on their backs. It is time we make this change. So many places around the world have done so, and it's time for New York State to step up. And so we thank our legislators for championing this package of bills. We thank all of the other advocates, Clean Healthy New York, for throwing this together today, and the Just Green Partnership for moving this all forward. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sonal. Now we're going to hear from Caitlin Ferrante from Sierra Club Atlantic Chapter.
Thanks, Bobbi. My name's Caitlin Ferrante. I'm the Conservation Program Manager for the Sierra Club Atlantic Chapter. We represent about 50,000 grassroots members around New York State. I think everyone who's already spoken today, our champions in the legislature, have said it so well. We're really trying to address these issues sector by sector, and this larger bill that Assemblyman Zebrowski is going to introduce is very exciting as we look to tackle this toxic legacy that is, already infiltrating our communities. So the Sierra Club is really grateful for the work being done by our champions, extremely excited to work to get these bills passed and signed into law as soon as possible. As Loreen and others from impacted communities are going to attest later in the press conference, these chemicals are finding their ways into our water, into our soil, into our communities, and into our bodies. Like I said, Assemblyman Zebrowski said it so well. Through the manufacture of these these products, through the life cycle of these products, these chemicals are finding their way into our communities and polluting our environment. We really need to support sustainable alternatives. Assemblymember Fahy said it really well, put the responsibility on those making these products back on those, put that responsibility back on those manufacturing these products, to think about the full life cycle of these products and not just the product when they sell it. They have to think about how it's going to impact when they end up in the landfills or things along those lines. So we fully support all of this work being done to turn off the tap of these toxic PFAS chemicals, and the work being done to remediate the contamination that has already been done to our communities. Very grateful to all of those working to get this done. Looking forward to working with my fellow partners and advocates and legislators to get these bills across the finish line this year and as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin. Now we're going to hear from Rich Schrader from the Natural Resources Defense Council.
Thanks so much, Bobbi. Let me make this point, two very brief points. We know that PFAS is everywhere. It's been said eloquently by my colleagues in the environmental community, as well as by our two assembly champions, but it's literally everywhere. We know now from recent studies that it's in the ocean. And when there's a wave that comes across the shore, it not only brings it onto the shore, but the air pollution is caused by PFAS. So there's no escaping it. And we know that most Americans have it in their body. As far as the clothing and textile products that are covered in these bills, there's no reason to have PFAS in them. They don't create any more durable product. They don't create any kind of better product in terms of what's being made, and they're only dangerous for consumers and dangerous for the people who are buying them. In fact, many leading brands in the clothing and textile sectors that are going to be covered by these bills, brands like Levi's, Gap, Osprey, Patagonia, they've already eliminated PFAS in their products, or they've made commitments to eliminate PFAS very soon. So protect our health and drinking water. The legislature should act quickly to eliminate PFAS wherever possible and support Assembly members Fahy and Zebrowski's bills. Thanks.
Thanks, Rich. Next, we're going to hear from Liz Moran from Earthjustice.
Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Moran. I'm the New York policy advocate with Earthjustice. Thank you to Clean Health New York for organizing this today. Huge thank you to the bill sponsors for your efforts on this really important issue. So sadly, New York is no stranger to the impacts caused by PFAS exposure. Many people are familiar with the drinking water crises in Hoosick Falls, New York, in Petersburg, New York, Newburgh, New York, many communities on Long Island. We know that at least 1.5 million New Yorkers have been exposed to high levels of PFOA or PFOS in their drinking water, and we know that number is assuredly much, much higher. PFAS are everywhere. They are pervasive chemicals, and they're dubbed forever chemicals for a reason. They last in our environment. They are very strong chemicals. So there have been lives that have been irreparably damaged and changed because of exposure to PFAS chemicals. There are people who are scared about the health for themselves and their families. We know that exposure to PFAS chemicals at any level can risk someone's health. We know there are a number of illnesses that are associated with exposure to PFAS. So as my colleagues have said before, we have to start addressing the life cycle of PFAS, because at every step in the process, PFAS poses a risk to public health, from their use in products needlessly that end up in our homes, providing direct exposure that way, to their use in production that ends up leading to drinking water contamination and air contamination. And then finally, when it comes to disposal, it ends up harming communities that are nearby landfills or incinerators. Then, of course, there's improper disposal that often happens with these contaminants. So addressing PFAS in products is a key step to preventing contamination in a number of routes. Of course, it'll prevent it directly in our homes, but it'll also help get PFAS out of production, which is a really key step here. New York thankfully has been making progress on PFAS over the years. We have drinking water standards for PFOA and PFOS. We're looking to have more drinking water standards. The legislature took really important action to ban PFAS from being used in firefighting foam and food containers. So we have to keep that up this year. We've got to keep the momentum going. We have to keep making progress. So Earthjustice is proud to stand alongside our partners today and to urge for passage of this package of legislation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Liz. Next, we are going to hear from Loreen Hackett from PFOA Project New York.
Good morning, everyone. We've now learned it's practically impossible to avoid PFAS in products, most of which aren't labeled to begin with. We're also likely, we also know we're being exposed to more than just one. EPA has now addressed PFOA and PFAS as likely carcinogens, and even though they've been phased out, they're still being found in products, and those are just 2 of these thousands of compounds. Do we know which ones or all of which products? No. Disturbingly, the more they look, the more they find. There's a new article out weekly where this stuff is found where it shouldn't be or even need be, and it's usually a jaw-dropping discovery. These bills to address this are a positive and wise start. Sincere thanks to the legislators and groups working with us in sponsoring and pushing this most vital legislation. Those of us in already contaminated communities like Hoosick Falls can ill afford, and I mean that quite literally, to continue to be exposed to untold amounts of these toxins that bioaccumulate. We likely try harder than most to avoid them, but we simply can't if they're in practically everything. With the plethora of research and health studies on the harmful health effects, we're in no-brainer territory that is absolutely necessary to stop PFAS exposures where we can. Bottom line, for the health of all of our families, and particularly our children, there's no excuse anymore that these bills shouldn't be flying through the legislature and signed by the governor as soon as possible. It's decades past time we get to decide on PFAS and be elevated as the most important stakeholders on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Loreen. And next, we're going to hear from Peggy Kurtz from the Rockland Water Coalition.
Okay, thank you so much. In Rockland County, nearly every one of our 60+ water sources is contaminated with multiple PFAS chemicals. The shockingly high costs of cleanup will fall on ratepayers. Since learning about the contamination of our drinking water, we have come to understand the seriousness and the magnitude of the contamination of our communities and our bodies with PFAS chemicals. These chemicals are toxic, virtually indestructible, and ubiquitous. The phrase that we've heard over and over from experts is that, like lead, there are no known safe levels of PFAS. With lead and asbestos, we have made huge strides toward reducing our exposure by stopping the widespread use of these chemicals in products. In order to deal with the PFAS contamination, we must do the same as was done so successfully with lead and asbestos: shut off the spigot and stop the PFAS contamination through thousands of consumer products. We want to thank all of the legislators here today for their leadership on this issue and urge the legislature to pass the bills this spring. It makes no sense to allow ongoing contamination, even as we struggle to clean up our water. Thank you.
Thanks so much to all of our speakers, to all of the sponsors of the bill. I just want to remind folks that basically what we are advocating for is a 4-part package. We heard from Assemblywoman Fahy talking about the bill to ban PFAS in apparel that has passed the Assembly and is on the floor of the Senate. We were unable to hear from either of the bill sponsors due to other conflicts on the Safe Personal Care and Cosmetics Act. This is a bill that addresses the broader suite of problems that we face in personal care and cosmetics, but it includes bans on PFAS. And It's currently on the floor of the Senate and in the Assembly Environmental Conservation Committee. And finally, in terms of bills that have numbers, the Carpet Responsibility Act passed both houses earlier this year, sponsored by Senator Kavanaugh and Assemblymember Engelbright. And then finally, this new bill that's forthcoming, expected to be, as you heard from Assemblymember Zebrowski, that will cover other key consumer and commercial products. Banning PFAS, as folks have said, is a class of over now, we understand 10,000 different chemical structures. It is vital that we act on this as a class, as we have been doing more and more, and not just looking at specific chemistries. We waste our time and we poison people when we follow that approach. So we strongly support addressing PFAS as a class. We are not alone here in New York, but New York's leadership does change marketplaces. We saw that after New York banned PFAS in food packaging, and we're joined by other states, that many companies started talking about national and global bans. We know that we can make a difference not only for our own communities, but for communities across the country and around the world. And this is, unfortunately, while a large step to pass these 4 bills, it is only the beginning. We have much more work to be done to address PFAS, to prevent it from harming people in its production, where it's used in manufacturing, in its use phase, and after it is either washed down the drain, dumped into a landfill, or sent to an incinerator. We have not talked today about some of the other long-term consequences. When we filter PFAS out of our sewage system in the form of biosolids, and that gets applied to farmland, it can end up contaminating farmland to the point that the crops or the animals that graze there are so contaminated with PFAS that they should not be consumed. We've seen this be a huge issue in Maine. We should not be surprised to learn that this is a problem here in New York. And it really points to the need for us to be looking at all of these chemistries in the context of a regenerative or circular economy where there is no way. They always come back to us. And so we think it's critical to take these steps today and look forward to the New York State Legislature, again, being a leader in the nation, again, helping to change the lives of people here in New York and across the country by addressing PFAS. And so with that, we would like to open the conversation up. If you would like to raise your hand, I can allow you to unmute yourself. We're asking members of the press to be the folks that ask questions if they have any. And I'm going to change my view so I can actually see if you're raising your hand. I don't see any questions at the moment. But Nadia's asking in the chat, which laws are we referring to in terms of PFAS packaging that was passed last year? So there's a ban on PFAS in food serviceware that was passed and goes into effect at the end of this year. So along with banning PFAS or banning styrofoam packaging, some of those replacements for cardboard were made with PFAS as the binder, and that will be illegal as of the end of this year. I see that we are also joined by Kate Carrera from Environmental Advocates. Kate, if you would like to say a couple of words, I'd be happy to give you permissions. Just let me know. And I'd also just invite any of the folks who spoke, if you'd like to come back and add any further thoughts, feel free. Okay. At this point in time, we're going to end the news conference. I will stay online for a couple of minutes in case folks have any final questions. We did drop the news release into the chat. I will do that again before we close out so that you can have access. It also includes a link over to the map that we released today. We think this is an important tool to understand the real impact and the financial impact to our taxpayers. So please feel free to use that information. Thank you so much.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Julia.
Hi, Bobbi. So my question is regarding the bill that has yet to be introduced. What do we have a sense of when that's actually coming out?
So it has, it's gone to, it has, the bill is drafted. It's waiting for a bill number. So
Okay.
we expect that at any day at this point. And we believe that there will be a Senate match to that as soon as there's a bill number.
Okay.
And
So
yeah,
yeah.
Go
No,
ahead.
keep going. Sorry.
No, I was going to respond to a different question. So please feel free to ask more.
Oh, yeah. So I was asking, have there been discussions in the background that make you think that the bill will pass this legislative session? Like, it's kind of odd to see a bill be introduced this late. So I'm curious as to whether it seems like there's an actual chance that it'll go somewhere this time around.
I think that the legislature often passes bills at the end of session that on issues that it thinks are important, and there's still time for that to happen.
Okay.
So, I think that PFAS is an issue that, we learn more every day about, as Loreen was saying. So we believe that if the political will is there, this is something that could definitely happen this session.
Okay, great. And then just one more question about the ban itself. Is there because I know like Maine's ban is, the 2030 is like the final date for when they want to phase out all PFAS. What's the date for the bill that's about to be introduced?
So because Maine has a much broader scope, right? It's addressing, basically calling on their state agency to phase out all what they're calling non-essential uses. It's got that longer timeline. I believe that the forthcoming bill has a timeline that's shorter than that, but I will share that as soon as we have the bill print.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And Nadia, I believe that the information about Rockland is on this map. If you're still here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I was just looking at the map and I don't see, I see the numbers pointing out like Newburgh, New Windsor, Stewart International Airport, and Rockland below doesn't have any numbers as far as money. Is that just because that's more recent?
Well, can you speak to that?
Yeah, it is more recent. And again, Nadia, as I mentioned this morning, we keep updating this map constantly. So I see stuff that we have that hasn't yet been updated by Safer States. But as I mentioned earlier, there's no part of the state that has proven to be immune from PFAS contamination.
Okay, thank you.
We'll get that information out to you.
All right.
And this is indeed a work in progress. I think that, we were working from publicly available information that we were able to find, but the real impact is going to be much higher. The further we dig in, the larger the number gets.
Sorry, and Nadia, when we started the project in mid-October, New York's contamination costs were only $84 million. And then as we started compiling, and then the Attorney General also got a settlement late last year, the number continues to balloon, where it's at now $752 million verified.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.